It appears that President Trump has engaged in some troubling behavior regarding the Ukraine and Joe Biden, behavior that has actually impelled House Democrats to open impeachment investigations. Today, we're going to talk about that controversy and why it's such a big deal. By the way, this is like the fourth time I've reshot this video because of the deluge of updating information on what will undoubtedly be a seminal moment in US history. So if I look tired, it's because, yes, I am, but I want this to be done right. So what started this latest controversy, and why was it a big enough deal that it managed to do what the Mueller report couldn't? Start an official impeachment investigation. It started in what feels like 10 years ago, but was really last week. News broke of a whistleblower who was concerned about actions the president made when speaking to the head of another government. Apparently, the content of that conversation was troubling, including some promises that were apparently made by President Trump. There was a brief period of time where we didn't know what government it was or what the content of that promise was. This is because the Whistleblowers Report was not released to congressional authorities, despite it being the suggested course of action prescribed under current federal whistleblowing law. Instead, Acting Director of National Intelligence Joseph McGuire ignored congressional subpoenas, insisting that he doesn't actually have to disclose the report to them. Many legal experts say that this move was illegal. In either case, the attempt to obstruct the information flow wasn't very effective. It was soon reported by the Wall Street Journal that the Whistleblowers Report concerned a phone call President Trump had with the president of the Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. The Journal reported that in that call, President Trump asked the Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, on long-dismissed allegations of corruption. A few days before the call, the president froze hundreds of millions of dollars that Congress allocated to the Ukraine for the purposes of defending itself against Russian territorial aggression. People have been saying that it's possible that the president refused to release that money unless the Ukraine played ball. Forgetting the whole quid pro quo aspect a second here, the idea that the president asked the Ukraine to dig up dirt on a political opponent is huge news. Remember, we just had a long, arduous special counsel investigation over whether the president's campaign did exactly this, but with Russia in 2016. Doing it as the president, with all the powers imbued in that office, will be one of the biggest presidential scandals in US history. For an even briefer period of time, all we had was this report and others made by other news outlets, which swiftly corroborated the Wall Street Journal's report with their own sources. But we didn't know if the president actually talked about Biden with Zelensky, until, true to form, he openly admitted.
It was largely the fact that we don't want our people, like Vice President Biden and his son, creating to the corruption already in the Ukraine.
Oh my god. Alright, I mean, at least the quid pro quo thing is just speculation.
Did the president threaten to cut off aid to the Ukraine?
No, that was a false story.
100%.
Well, I can't tell you if it's 100%.
Because we know.
I went off this wild ride. Press was soon reporting that the president did in fact attempt to engage in some sort of quid pro quo with Zelensky, which makes this already huge scandal worse. And that pushed the Democratic Speaker of the House and longtime impeachment skeptic Nancy Pelosi to announce that the House is in fact beginning the process needed to impeach the president. The president promised that he would release a transcript of the conversation in question, claiming that it would totally exonerate him because it was a beautiful and very nice conversation, and I wish I was joking, those are actually the words he used to describe it. Unlike his tax returns, he actually did release something, although as the first words at the top of the thing states, it's a memo, not actually a full transcript. And inside this memo, clear as day, there's a lot of talk about Biden's son, that Biden stopped the prosecution, and a lot of people want to find out that, so whatever you can do with the Attorney General would be great. In order to understand what kind of dirt the president is specifically eliciting here, let's take a fun little jaunt into Conspiracyville, because that's basically what it's looking like. The president's request centers around an assertion that Joe Biden made in 2014 that the United States was going to withhold billions of dollars worth of aid from the Ukraine unless it fired a particular prosecutor. It was rumored that the prosecutor was actively looking into Biden's son's activity with an energy firm, which the son was on the board of directors. That prosecutor was ultimately fired. Now, Biden did publicly make that request, his son did in fact work for the energy firm, and the prosecutor was fired. Few things though. First, Biden was actually advancing the official position of the entire US government and several other Western nations because that investigator was like super corrupt. In fact, the senior Biden had complained that the prosecutor's investigation into the firm was too lax as evidence of that corruption. Second, while the firm that his son worked for was definitely under investigation, the rumor that the son himself was under investigation has been thoroughly rejected. The Ukrainian government has gone on the record multiple times as saying that Hunter Biden didn't do anything wrong. But the story has been continued to be echoed by multiple cable media outlets without anyone doing much actual fact-checking. Regardless of its veracity, the president did in fact ask the president of the Ukraine to investigate one of his political rivals. This is right there in the document, clear as day, in the document that the White House claimed would exculpate the president of any wrongdoing. Elements of the supposed quid pro quo appear to be in there as well. Zelensky, we are ready to continue to cooperate for the next steps. Specifically, we are almost ready to buy more javelins from the United States for defense purposes. Trump, I would like for you to do us a favor though, because our country has been through a lot and the Ukraine knows a lot about it. Going on to discuss aspects of election interference in 2016, and a little later in the same conversational thread, Trump, the other thing, there's a lot of talk about Biden's son, that Biden stopped the prosecution, and a lot of people want to find out about that. This is the document that they thought would be exonerating? Better buckle up, folks, this is going to get bumpy in the next couple of months. There's a lot going on with this story, and frankly the press's coverage is all over the place. It's debating whether or not there was actually quid pro quo, when that's only the thing that makes the situation worse and not the biggest part of the whole deal. Debating whether or not Biden or his son did anything wrong, which is so far beyond the point that I'd need a telescope to find it. So I think it might be helpful if we just stopped to break down all the elements that are really, really bad about this. Perhaps most obviously is the fact that the president asked a foreign government to deliver dirt on a political opponent. No matter how many times the president or his lawyer or his personal brigade of pundits try to say that they did nothing wrong, federal election statutes very clearly state that candidates cannot solicit foreign nationals for campaign contributions, and information is considered a campaign contribution. This isn't only undemocratic, it's against federal law. There's the fact that the president felt emboldened enough to leverage money that Congress already allocated, money that he was already legally required to spend for personal campaign aid. There's the troubling aspect that the thing that the president apparently wants the Ukrainian government to investigate is tantamount to a conspiracy theory to weaken his opponent. Look, I'm not saying that candidates shouldn't try to legally dredge out as many skeletons as they can from each other's closets. They absolutely should. Negative information makes campaigns more informative. But when they illegally ask another country to pretend that there's a skeleton there, that's problematic. As a brief aside, I also love the insistence of who else but the president is going to investigate these dastardly allegations? Surely not the expansive intelligence apparatus with information sharing agreements with nations around the world and strict protocols to ensure that their interference in the political system is minimized. Nope, not them. Just an unapologetically self-interested politician. Sure. There's also the fact that the president made this call less than a day after the Mueller report came back and said that there wasn't sufficient evidence to say that the president knowingly colluded with Russia. Then he admitted to doing the same thing with the Ukraine! That's like convincing your parents that despite the fact you were playing ball in the house, it was the dog who broke the window. And then once they decide that they're going to cut you some slack since they don't have enough evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it was you, you straight up punt the ball into the fucking TV. But there are more than a few really, really troubling things going on right here. One obvious question as anger rises and answers are demanded is whether or not any of this is impeachable. Yes. As I've mentioned before, well, several times actually, because apparently the president hovers around impeachable offenses like a moth to a flame, impeachment is not a legal determination, but a political one. He could be impeached for the way that he eats his pizza if Congress decided that that constituted a high crime or misdemeanor. Which, as a Sicilian, don't get me wrong, it definitely does, but there are other more pressing matters to attend to first. Now that the House has begun the impeachment process, it's important to note that there's no guarantee that this will lead to the president's removal from office. Two presidents were ever impeached by the House and tried in the Senate. Both of them, Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton, were acquitted. Nixon resigned before the impeachment vote took place in the House. There are lots of veto points in the impeachment process. First, the investigation has to happen, then the committee has to agree on what articles to propose and send to the House floor. The House has to vote on it, then there has to be a trial in the Senate, and 2/3 of the Senate has to convict. Some people are saying that the president actually stands very little chance of being impeached because of all these things, but especially because of that final point, the Senate. As it stands as a filming, this is absolutely true. You need 66 votes to remove the president from office once articles of impeachment are passed by the House. There are 53 Republicans in the Senate. You might get a few of them to break off if the vote was happening today, but you're not getting half of the caucus. But two things about that. First, abrogating one's constitutional responsibilities in the hopes that they wouldn't have to pay for them electorally is the kind of cowardice that shows that they didn't deserve to be sworn in the first place. Second, the amount of information that will be publicly disseminated during an impeachment trial may shift the electoral calculus such that it becomes impossible to ignore this president's issues. I'm not going to bother asserting my opinion on whether or not I think the president should be impeached. Y'all are smart enough to figure out where I stand here. Y'all are sharp cookies, but I do think it's fruitful to say why I feel something needs to happen. Here's why the president needs to be held accountable. The history of the presidency, extending as far back as Jefferson, is one of tentative pushes of executive power. They assert something under their purview, and Congress either pushes back or doesn't. If it does, the president may be checked, depending on the issue and the day, but if it doesn't, the president's authority has just gotten larger. In that respect, this might be some of the most normal stuff to happen in this presidency. The fact that the president keeps trying to push to see when he's going to get checked. The problem is, he's hardly faced any substantial feedback from Congress. Not about the Muslim ban, not the credible allegations of obstruction of justice, not the changes to the immigration system, not the unilateral Twitter tariffing, not the unconstitutional diversion of military funds to build his border wall, or the things that he does to reduce the power of competing institutions, such as publicly rejecting the views of the intelligence community on Russian interference in favor of Putin's, and repeatedly denigrating the press as the enemy of the people. He continues to push boundaries because he's never been checked. And if the executive keeps pushing and pushing, expanding the bounds of its authority, eventually it stops being a democratic republic at some point. What happens if the president loses 2020 but declares a national emergency because of all the non-existent voter fraud, insisting that he remain in office until everything gets sorted out? What happens if he wins in 2020 and decide that come 2024, all those times that he joked about running for a third term? Yeah, he wasn't joking. More plausibly, at least to me, is that Trump won't be the autocrat. Already we've seen Democratic presidential candidates say that they're going to use executive orders to combat climate change because they saw the president get away with it for his border wall. As somebody who agrees that we need to act to reduce global warming, that sends a chill up my spine. The person to take that final step over the tenuous line into autocracy might have either an R or a D attached to their name. Half of the country will boisterously cheer, but all of it will lose. We have this belief that our experiment in self-governance is unbreakable and self-perpetuating, but it isn't, not on either count. What we're seeing uncomfortably tracks with other stories of democratic decline, but it doesn't have to. At the end of the day, the first three words of the Constitution are we, the people. Democratic norms are something that we carry, that we enforce through our voice and our vote. If we want those things to continue to matter, we have to use them. It's that simple. I'm curious to see what you guys think about this, about the president's actions, about what Congress should do about it, thoughts like that, or thoughts on other topics, preferably one that isn't presidential scandal pleas, or other things that cropped up while watching this video. Looking forward to reading all of them, answering a few in the next office hours. Special thanks to those supporting Press Politics on Patreon. I'd like to give a special shout out to research assistant Joel. Patrons get exclusive content, early content, and shout outs. So if you'd like to be able to help, you can click down in the doobly-doo or at the end card of the video. I really appreciate it. So I know that I said a while ago that I was going to stop doing comment responses because people started leaving the videos early, and that the total watch time, being a big factor in the algorithm was a consideration. So that I was going to do comment responses more sporadically. But one, I have a hard time making those kinds of standalone videos. I honestly couldn't tell you why. I don't even know myself. Two, YouTube isn't promoting my stuff, no matter what kind of cheat code I try to encode into my content, so f it. And most importantly, three, I enjoy doing it. I enjoy touching base with you guys every video. And we're bringing it back. You can duck out if you don't want to watch this part. I totally understand, and I hold no grudges. I appreciate any amount of time that you decide to stick around. Last video, I talked about the North Carolina special election and what that could mean for Trump in 2020. So let's see what you guys had to say about that. Ambery Gomez thinks that President Trump will win in 2020, and I think that's really interesting, and I'd love to understand why you feel that way. I personally think that the Democrats are slightly favored, but there are 1.5 million ways for them to surrender this advantage and ultimately lose the contest. So let me know. I love getting opinions that differ from mine. It's how we learn, right? Dodi Delios asked if it could be possible for it to run a whole term without anyone being voted into a particular congressional office. Off the top of my head, I don't know of any districts where this has happened, but people with better historical knowledge, feel free to jump in here. I don't know any mechanisms that would prevent a seat from being filled if something like the voter fraud or the election fraud happened and the state wasn't able to resolve it in time to hold a special election. But again, I honestly don't know here. Like I said, people who do, don't be shy. Let Jody and I both know down in the comment section below. That'll do it for this week. Thank you guys so much. I'm glad to be doing this. You can probably tell from the fact that I'm much more upbeat at this point. This is very rejuvenative. So thank you guys so much, and please keep the comments coming. Sources for everything is always be down in the doobie-doo, as well as links to Facebook, Twitter, and the blog. Look forward to seeing you guys out there as well. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you consider giving it a thumbs up. If you want to support the channel, you can do so by commenting down below, by sharing this video, and by subscribing to the channel. Stay in the loop for more awesome social science content is uploaded. If you want to be guaranteed to be in the loop when I upload a new video, be sure to click the bell icon as well. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time.